My name is Sarah, a divorced woman in my late 20s. I'm going to share a story that happened about a year ago about my ex-husband's unbelievable betrayal and the astonishing events that followed. I was with John, my ex-husband, since our college days. After graduating and securing jobs, we got married 2 years later. John, who had a sales job at a cosmetics manufacturing company, used to say, "Appearance is everything in sales." And so he put even more effort into maintaining his looks than he did in college. Around the time we got married, his company started doing quite well, so John started investing more in his outfits. He was so particular about his hair that he went to the salon twice a month, just to keep it perfect. I mean, you can't have a sales rep for a cosmetics company looking shabby. So I had to hold back my feelings whenever I thought, isn't he going a bit overboard? Especially when comparing his situation to mine. As for me, I quit my job to become a homemaker after we got married. After about a year, I started thinking about having kids. But John would always respond with, "We don't have enough money. It's just not possible right now," and was reluctant to agree. So, I reluctantly started working part-time to convince him. I juggled two jobs, worked 5 days a week at both a gas station and a grocery store. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, to the point where I felt I might be busier than John himself. I couldn't even go to a hair salon often. Yet, what kept me going was John's kindness that he expressed occasionally. Once every 3 months or so, there were days when he would make a reservation for the both of us at the hair salon. We spent the whole day together just being out on a date. We would get our hair done in the morning and then go shopping or watch movies. Although there were things I wish John did better, the time spent together on our dates made up for it. Those dates helped ease out our tension and maintain our healthy relationship. However, 2 years after getting married, Megan, a friend from our college days who lived nearby, told me this. "Sarah, did you know there's a rumor going around that John's cheating on you with another woman?" Of course, I, who had no way of knowing such a thing, was shocked. Unlike me, Megan was already a mother of two. She was enjoying her daily meetups with other moms in the park. Among the gossip there, it seemed there was one about John going into a hotel with a young woman every Friday. Sure enough, John was usually late coming home on Fridays, but that was because he had to tally the week's sales results for the weekend. At that time, I completely believed his story. Thinking it must be some mistake, I tried to tell Megan, but she countered. I saw it once too. Megan grabbed my shoulder and persuaded me in a strong tone. "Something's fishy for sure. You have to talk to him about this." That day, I told John about the gossip. Really because Megan pushed me to talk to him, but also because I wanted to be reassured and tell others that it wasn't true. I thought that if I confirmed this with John and he denied it, I could feel at ease. As expected, John refuted my story, saying it was just a rumor. There was a female employee who came from out of state for a meeting. It seemed she would be late returning home, so I took her to the hotel she stayed at. "Don't take strange rumors seriously." He snapped back and denied the rumor. I didn't think he would be this upset for being doubted, so I didn't know how to respond for a second. Then I felt very bad for doubting my husband when he did nothing wrong. I deeply regretted accusing my husband of cheating even for a bit. However, right after that, I witnessed my husband entering a hotel with a woman. The two of them, arm in arm, looked like nothing but lovers. John was wearing the suit he had worn to work that day, and the woman was in a hoodie. It didn't look like something you'd wear to a company-wide meeting. I remembered that they were seen going to the hotel every Friday, so I started to stake out around the hotel in the evenings every Friday, and sure enough, every week, John appeared with this woman. John always had his sunglasses on, and the woman had her hood deep over her eyes, seemingly trying not to be noticed. But it was the figure of my husband whom I saw every day. He wasn't under much disguise, so it was clear that it was my husband. I knew I needed proof, so I took pictures with my phone. I had to do something, so I took the initiative to contact my in-laws and explain the situation. However, the two of them, who have always been sweet on John, their youngest child, brushed off my story as if it were just a rumor. What a nice guy escorting a girl who's on a business trip safely to her hotel. Seeing my father-in-law start to praise John, I showed him the picture of John with this woman. Please, you two, look at this. The two of them seemed a bit flustered when they saw the pictures, but they quickly composed themselves. A young man with a young woman? It's normal for others to take it that way. The mother-in-law laughed, and the father-in-law nodded in agreement. The fact that it's every week is strange, and no matter how many times I look at the woman's outfit, it doesn't look like she just left the office. Their reaction got on my nerves, so to prove my husband's infidelity, I decided to get some more solid proof. I knew John was careless. He often leaves his phone on the desk with all of his notifications on. Everything pops up on his screen, both the messages and its senders. I'd never thought about going through his notifications until now, but of course, it was different this time. I took a peek at his phone that was left on his desk as usual. Looking forward to our beach trip on Friday night, I was both shocked and dumbfounded. I couldn't believe they were brazen enough to chat about such a thing through texts. I felt like they were treating me like I was stupid, which only intensified my anger. That very night, John told me that he had to go on a trip starting Friday night for his company's gathering. He said it so casually, but I knew it was just a facade. It was amusing to see him trying to hide something so obvious, and I felt a sense of superiority. When I asked where he was going, he responded with the name of a beach resort by the mountains. It seems he's staying at a hotel, which we've been to together before. When I called the hotel, they indeed had a reservation under John's name for Friday night. That Friday, I decided to bring my in-laws to the said hotel. Charles, my nephew-in-law, a vocational school student living with my in-laws, also wanted to come. He must have heard from my in-laws. Charles is the only son of John's eldest brother. He lost his parents in a car accident when he was in elementary school and has since been raised by my in-laws, perhaps due to their close age. Charles was particularly fond of John among many uncles and aunts. Following John's lead, he even started to become interested in fashion and has been saying he wants to be a hairstylist. John seemed to be very happy that Charles liked him. The two of them were more like brothers than uncle and nephew. They called each other by all sorts of nicknames, too. He must have found it hard to believe the unfaithfulness of his beloved young uncle, just like me, a little while ago. He must have wanted concrete proof that things were not what they seemed. The thought of this hurt my heart, but in the end, he couldn't come because he had school. Fateful Friday. I arrived at the hotel a little earlier than the time John and the women's check-in time and waited for them with my skeptical in-laws. He's probably not coming, my father-in-law murmured, relieved when they didn't show up after waiting for a while. However, just as my father-in-law sighed and started to get up from his seat, they arrived. A man in a suit and incongruous sunglasses and a woman whose face was half hidden by the hood of her hoodie arrived. As soon as the two walked through the entrance of the hotel, they kissed without waiting for the automatic door behind them to close. At that moment, the woman's hood fell down, revealing her hidden face. I was stunned by the beauty that had come into clear view. She had cute acorn-like eyes, a small nose pointed up, beautifully upturned lips, and her inner hair beautifully dyed bright red, which was familiar. She was a hairstylist at the hair salon my husband frequented. I had had her shampoo and blow-dry my hair several times. I remember talking to her across the mirror, saying, "I'm going on a date with my husband after this." I was completely taken aback. I had been unknowingly going to the salon where the woman my husband was cheating with worked, excited about my post-haircut date with him. Did she think I was a dumb old woman, oblivious to my husband's infidelity, while she dried my hair? Thinking this, my anger began to boil. I wanted to strike down both John and the woman. I looked at my in-laws. You both understand now, right? John is undoubtedly having an affair. They made faces as if they had bitten into sand and apologized. Never mind that. Could you please cooperate with me? Later at dinner, my in-laws and I sat next to John and the woman. My plan to get back at them was quite simple. We would appear in front of them and confront them in a situation where they couldn't make excuses. I thought that if it became known that he had been unfaithful not only to me, but also to his parents, even John would learn his lesson. Good day. As I greeted him, John turning to me widened his eyes so much that the outlines of his pupils were discernible. His lover asked, "What? Who are they?" But John's half-open mouth just flapped without any words coming out. Anger surged to me again towards his mistress, who didn't even recognize me. I retorted in a sharp tone, more like, "Who are you? A colleague from work?" For the first time, his mistress reacted and was taken aback. Seems like she finally recognized me. She tried to get help from John by making eye contact, but John was stunned too. I blurted out, "So it's true that you go to a hotel with some woman? How could you be so bold and lie to me? You were actually cheating on me, and yet you got mad at me for doubting you. As soon as you guys entered here, you two were kissing. We saw it clearly." At this point, anger flared in John's eyes. He glared at me and said in a low voice, "Cheating? What do you mean?" And raised his voice, "So you're telling me it's all my fault? Shut up. You were so busy with your part-time job or whatever and never bothered to dress well for yourself. You always look so shabby, and I can't be going out with someone like you." Spurred by my husband's counterattack, his lover suddenly became more energetic. "By the way, are you his wife? I couldn't even tell at first glance, because you look so shabby. Gosh, I even gave you a wonderful haircut at my place. How dare you talk to her like that?" Finally, my father-in-law raised his voice. "John, shut this girl up right now. And John, how dare you talk to your own wife like that? Shut up. That's how you make me the bad guy." Well, that's to be expected. Unlike my older brother and sister, I'm never good enough. You always made me take on extra classes because I was never talented. John, that's not right. Shut up, old hag. John raised his voice again. But my mother-in-law was right. My mother-in-law had always told me John's older brother and sister struggled in school, so we made John attend extra classes and tutoring, so he wouldn't have to struggle like his siblings. We did everything we could to make sure John didn't fall behind in school. He was showered with love, yet his view was skewed. After that, John continued to insult me and his parents, who tried to confront John, loudly calling them old man and old hag. "All of you don't understand me and always put me down. That's why I couldn't stand it and went for a girl who understands me. What's wrong with that?" Suddenly, John's phone rang. It was a call from someone. At first, John ignored it, but annoyed by the relentless ringing, he took out his phone to check it. Immediately, I could see the blood draining from John's face. Wondering what was wrong, I peeped at the screen to see a text. And just by looking at the text, I could tell his fury was flooding in like a demon. "How dare you? Because of you, our reputation is ruined. What are you doing and where are you? Come to my office right now." For some reason, John's boss was furious. I had no idea what was going on. John's phone went off again. This time, it seemed to be a call. And John answered in a flustered manner. "Charles, it's not what you think it is. I can explain." He got a call from Charles. From the moment I confronted John, I had called Charles to let him hear everything that went down. Charles requested for me to do so. Charles's voice was loud enough for us to hear. "No, I know just exactly what you did. I heard everything. I can't forgive you for all the rude things you said to your wife and berating my grandpa and grandma. How dare you? Also, Ashley will get a call soon too." At Charles's words, John's mistress shuddered. Huh? How does Charles know John's mistress? She's getting a call? From whom? I wondered, but I soon learned why. I'm currently interning at a hair salon for school, and the owner of the salon's right here with me. He's been listening to everything. He said he's even contacted your boss, John. Yes, that's right. Charles is aspiring to be a hairstylist and attends a cosmetology school. The salon where he is interning turned out to be the one John frequents. In retrospect, I just remembered that Charles was the one who introduced the place to John. But why would his manager call John's boss? In the middle of the call with Charles, John's phone went off again. John hurriedly looked at his phone, which he held up to his ear. The call was from his boss. The same one from earlier. "I'm so sorry." The first thing that John said when he put the phone back to his ear was a strained apology. However, the voice on the other end was just as furious as earlier. "No apology will make up for this. You having an affair with a worker from a hair salon run by our CEO's older brother. I let you be in charge to handle business with that store, since your nephew happened to be interning there. But how dare you make a fool out of us? Our CEO's older brother said he will no longer buy our cosmetics or our shampoo products ever again. He said he'll spread the word to the people and industry too. I was even more flabbergasted. Who would have thought that the hair salon was a business partner of John's company, and its manager was the CEO's brother? But the most shocking revelation of the day was yet to come. That girl, she's engaged to the son of the CEO's older brother, right? Did you lay a hand on her knowing that? I was dumbfounded. The woman had been cheating with John, even though she was engaged to the son of her manager. To summarize, John had an affair with a girl that worked at the hair salon that Charles had introduced him. The place happened to be owned by the older brother of John's company's CEO. The hair salon was actually an important client for John. And even worse, the girl he cheated with was engaged to her manager's son. It was clear that this would cause trouble in many ways if people found out. The audacity of these people. John's mistress also got a call. Ashley, do you think it's okay to have an affair with your client? You're even engaged to my son. What did you say to his wife? You're fired right here and now. Also, we're done dealing with that company's shampoo and cosmetics. Don't you and your man ever come here again. The frantic behavior of John and Ashley after that was something to behold. Both of them made numerous excuses and apologized over and over again on the phone, but it seemed to no avail. In the end, John turned beet red and Ashley left the hotel sobbing. I heard later that Charles, when he heard about John's affair, immediately suspected it was Ashley. So he consulted with the salon manager, and they both kept an eye on the situation here. After that, I divorced John. At first, he said, I don't need you anyway. But after Ashley told him she had been fired because of him, he turned around and started pleading with me. Don't divorce me. You're all I have, he said. But I cut him off without a second thought. And now, I've become a full-time employee at the grocery store where I worked part-time, and I'm studying to become the manager here. I owe it all to my years of dedication as a part-time worker. I don't need to rely on John's income anymore. By the way, I hear that John's sales performance has deteriorated rapidly since he lost the deal with that beauty salon. The rumors spread at his workplace, so I'm sure it affected John. According to Charles, John quit the company voluntarily. He was either encouraged to resign or felt uncomfortable staying at his workplace. After graduating from his cosmetology school, Charles got a job at that hair salon. Now, I am his regular customer. Although, he being a novice hairstylist cannot yet handle real customers, so he practices on me by cutting my hair. It's practice, so it's free, Charles says, but I feel bad about that, so I pay at least half the actual price. To be honest, Charles occasionally asks me out on dates, but I want to prioritize my work and my own time for now, so This story is called Cheating Flight Attendant Wants an Open Relationship. I have never been to a forum. I am 48 years old and my wife is 44 and we have been married for 15 years. We had a good relationship, at least I thought we did, but it has been almost 2 years since we have had any real intimacy. My wife had some childhood trauma way back when I won't say what it was, but it's affected her for a good portion of her life. But with therapy, she has been able to overcome most of it. One of the reasons we didn't have any kids was while she was going to therapy, she was on quite a bit of medication. Some of this medication has some serious side effects, but she really didn't have many setbacks from the medication before my wife became a flight attendant. She was helping her father run a gas station they own. They had a falling out because she wanted more money. Her becoming a flight attendant came out of nowhere. She had lunch with a friend of hers who was a flight attendant and told her how lucrative the position can be. She told my wife that when she became a flight attendant, they started her out at $35,000 per year, but she told my wife the downside to being a flight attendant: it's hard to maintain a relationship in most cases. After that meeting, my wife and I talked about it since my wife had a necessary education of requirements, and I think the airlines required some additional schooling and training. She applied at 4 different airlines: Delta, United Airlines, Frontier Airlines, and Southwest Airlines. Delta was the only one that hired her at first. I was happy for her. She was making about the same as I was making at the time, and she kept getting raises every year. It seemed substantial raises, but what I didn't know then is that this job came with the price. My wife was gone a lot. I mean, It seemed like she was going every day, only coming home for a few days at a time when she was home. She wasn't really present. I couldn't figure out why. After about the third year of her being a flight attendant is when I noticed her behavior slightly shifting. She would come home and we would have a few days of bliss, but it seemed like the second week she was back home. She was thought to get strange. Not only did her behavior change, her spending habits also changed. She was buying a lot of sexy clothes, but I didn't see her in those clothes. I started to get suspicious, but I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I wanted to make sure before I confront her with indisputable evidence, so as the weeks and months go by, she is still traveling, coming home, not touching me, and spending lots of money on clothing. Well, I had lunch with a friend one day and told him what was happening. He travels quite a bit himself, and he honestly said, "I don't know what I can tell you then." He said, "If she is cheating on you away from home, how will you find out?" He said hiring a private investigator may be your only option, but it's going to be expensive. He was right. I knew it would be expensive. So I called around to a few places, actually found a husband and wife team that were private investigators after work. I went to see them and told them all of my suspicions. She wasn't initiating anything with me in the bedroom, buying clothes and not wearing them in front of me. Then this guy's wife said, "What does she do for a living?" I said, "She's a flight attendant." She shakes her head and said, "Sir, I don't have a good feeling about what you told me." My heart just sank after she said that. I told them I needed to find out what was going on. They gave me their price. It would cost me almost $7,000 to follow her while she was traveling and get the video footage. They told me to go home and think about it and get back to them when I have the opportunity. One went back home, and to my surprise, my wife wanted to talk to me, and it wasn't pleasant. She basically told me, not in so many words, she was not happy with our sex life and wanted to explore an open relationship. I said, "What the hell do you mean?" She says, "I want to see other men." I basically told her, "No way. I am not doing that." Then she says, "So you want me to be unhappy with our boring sex life?" I said, "No, I don't want you to be unhappy, but I am not willing to accept that I am not participating in an open relationship." Well, as you guessed it, that conversation didn't resolve anything. We went to bed not speaking to one another that night. The next day, I met with the husband and wife team that are private investigators and pay them their fee of $7,000. The husband was going to stay behind, and his wife was going to travel and do the surveillance on my wife. I told them my wife was leaving on a certain day. I gave them a picture of her, what kind of car she drove, and where she usually hangs out when she is home. Over the next few days before she was due to travel again, their surveillance showed her on her cell phone a lot and going to the mall on occasion, mostly by herself on the day she was traveling. The private investigators sent me a text showing my wife walking next to a man, and they were walking rather quickly. I assumed to make sure they made the flight. The private investigators simply asked me, did I know this man? I simply replied that I didn't. So the private investigators sent me a text saying from that point on she was documenting everything and would be in touch as soon as they landed. Later that night, the private investigators said that my wife and the same guy she boarded the plane with went to a hotel which had a bar in it. They had drinks and then went up to the hotel room together. The next day, the private investigators sent me a text saying that my wife had checked out of the hotel by herself at around 11 in the morning, but she said that wasn't enough. She wanted to get them together, embracing, kissing, something, words that I didn't want to hear, but my gut was telling me she was cheating while the private investigator was telling me all this. I still had to somehow focus at work. I work as a computer analyst, and my job is stressful enough. I get home that night around 9 p.m., and the private investigator called me. She had footage of my wife and this guy embracing each other outside the hotel, kissing for about 15 minutes before getting into a cab together and leaving. My world came crashing down. That very moment, I sat in my living room, almost lifelessly pondering how to proceed from here. That's when I decided there is only one thing I can do now, is file for divorce. But I wasn't going to let her know that I was filing for divorce. That night, I started researching laws related to adultery as well as divorce laws in my state, in which is Arizona. To my surprise, it's a class 3 misdemeanor, but I didn't want to do that. I found a lawyer and met with her right away. I told a lawyer I already had a private investigator on the job, and I gave the lawyer some of the footage the private investigator had, and she will be giving me more footage. I paid the retainer to the lawyer, and she said she would help me proceed with the divorce when I am ready and also get her more proof of my wife's infidelity. So, after leaving the lawyer's office, my private investigator has sent me a text asking me to call her. So, I did. She tells me she is going to end the investigation. I asked her why. She says, "What I am about to send to you is probably enough for you to divorce your wife." My heart just started racing. She sends me a clip of them having sex in the back of a rental car, and she says if you want more footage, she can, but reiterated that she really didn't need to go any further, and I agreed. But after she said that, she told me she was going to find out who this guy was and get information on him as well. At this point, I was so broken. My heart just stopped beating at the sight of this video. My wife was soon to come back in 4 days, so I had to start planning on what I needed to do as soon as possible. One of the first things I did was remove her from all of my credit cards. She hardly used them, but just a precaution. I removed her second. She was a beneficiary on my insurance policy. I removed her from being a beneficiary and made my mom the beneficiary temporarily to my credit. We never commingled funds, meaning we always had separate bank accounts, so I didn't need to do anything there since we both owned the house. I knew I couldn't just kick her out, so I asked my lawyer, "What should I do in this situation?" She said the house is community property and will be split between both parties. Once my lawyer told me that, I started looking for another place to stay and found a place that was close to my mom's house. Fast forward a day. I get a call from my private investigator. She tells me that my wife's AP is married, owns a used car dealership, and has 2 kids, and has another business with someone else. She told me she sent a packet to me with all of his information and his address. So that day I had my lawyer file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and I started packing my things. My soon-to-be ex-wife was due to come back in 2 days. The next step was to get this packet to this guy's wife and get it to her before he returns. I got off work that evening and went to her house and knocked on the door. She answered through her Ring doorbell asking who I was and what I wanted. I just came out and said, "Ma'am, I think your husband is having an affair with my wife, and I have proof." Needless to say, her door opened with lightning speed. When I saw her, I just handed her the packet and walked away. The next day, my wife was scheduled to come home, so that morning I took off work to move some of my things to storage just to be out of the house until my apartment was ready. I had to stay with my mom for a few weeks. Until then, the next step was to get home with the second packet before my wife did and leave it on the dining room table for her to see. I was pretty much moved out by then. I eventually got home before my wife did and left the packet on the table. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, I had over 200 calls on my phone and doubled that amount in text messages. She called me and sent me text messages up until midnight. I didn't answer her calls or respond to her text messages. I was mad and done. At the same time, a few days later, my wife was served with divorce papers, and I did not hear from her. When she did get them, fast forward a week, and my attorney calls me and says my soon-to-be ex-wife isn't asking for anything too crazy in the divorce. No alimony. She just wants one car and her half of the equity in the house. At the divorce hearing, it was quick and painless. We agreed to split the equity in the home. I agreed to give her one of the cars we owned, and we agreed to split some of the belongings in the house. About 4 months after the divorce, I learned that my ex-wife's AP was arrested on federal fraud charges. Apparently, he was fraudulently obtaining government contracts with his business partner, and I also learned that my ex-wife never stopped seeing her AP, even when she was blowing up my phone that night and professing her love for me. 2 months later, we sold the house and split the equity we had in the house. When I was at the closing, she was trying to talk to me. I simply told her we don't have anything to discuss outside of the sale of the house. After that, I never heard from or saw her again. Last I heard, she was still a flight attendant, and she may have been involved in her AP's fraud case. When I got this story, I was told to leave the names out for privacy reasons. In my opinion, I don't think I would have spent $7,000 for a private investigator, but his private investigator had to travel to get proof, which really didn't matter anyway, because his ex-wife only wanted a few things, including the equity in the home. I imagine he recouped that $7,000 he spent from the sale of the house. I don't think he was a simp in this case. In my personal opinion, I think he handled the situation the best way he thought he should have handled it. He didn't lose a lot of money, and his divorce was This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube, and we're back at you this week with another great story. You can see the title right on your screen. Cheating girlfriend and her parents went psycho after I ghosted her. Now, let's get into this story and see what it's all about. He starts out and he says, "Take this post for what it's worth. I think it will be helpful for some and to others just an entertaining read. This saga all started about 9 years ago when I was 24 and my then girlfriend was 22. For this post, I'll refer to my girlfriend as Melissa and to myself as Nigel. At the time, I had been working for about 2 years as an account manager for a well-known tech company. I moved to the city for this job, and while I loved the work and was making phenomenal money, I was lost and very lonely. Being so far away from friends and family and in a strange place, I threw myself into my job. I used dating apps and went out on occasion to bars, but only had a few dates, nothing serious. Then one day I was out at a local place by myself listening to a band and noticed Melissa. She walked into the bar and sat down on one of the stools. I watched her from a table thinking this pretty girl has to be there waiting for someone. I then saw her place an order with the bartender. When she got her drink, she turned to watch the band. I thought to myself, this girl is all alone. As luck or unluck would have it, a stool opened up right beside her, and I headed over there to claim it. I asked her if the seat was taken. She replied no, it was all mine. When the band took a break, she and I started talking and immediately bonded. She had recently moved to the city for work and was feeling kind of lost too. From that night on, things moved quickly for us. We had our first date that very weekend and officially became an exclusive couple a week later. I was head over heels in love, and again in this story, I have to tell the OP, no, you were not head over heels in love after just a week of dating. You were in lust, my friend. I have to admit back then I felt like she was an angel sent to fill the deep, empty void in my life. After about a month, she basically started living at my place, even though she still had a small apartment of her own. A few months later, her lease came up, and instead of renewing it, I asked her to move in with me after just 5.5 months of dating. Big mistake there, moving in just after 5.5 months. What are you thinking? I really thought I had found the one. So this guy was just totally smitten. You can see that. My parents like Melissa. While her parents gave me bad vibes, her dad is a high school football coach and gym teacher. He initially hardly spoke to me and barely made eye contact. In fact, when we met, I extended my hand, but he just turned away. I got the sense the guy didn't like me. Her mom was just obnoxious. She's one of those loud, overbearing people who are really unpleasant to be around. You know the type. When we announced we were moving in together, my parents expressed their displeasure, saying it was too soon. Well, you should have listened to your parents. Her parents blew a gasket until they found out I would be paying 75% of the rent and expenses, including food. They seemed okay with it, though not completely happy. As time went on, my relationship with Melissa got better and better. Things were going so well that I started thinking about when I would pop the question. Even her wacky parents started treating me with respect and as part of the family, especially after I got a big promotion and no longer required Melissa to pay anything to live with me. Another big mistake. I don't care what she's earning. You've got to make her contribute. All of a sudden, they saw me as future son-in-law material and started visiting us a few times each month, he says, unfortunately. Melissa's dad, who treated me like dirt before, started treating me like his best friend after I took him to several professional sports games and we sat and ate in my company's luxury box. Even though his sentiment changed, I never trusted the guy. I just had a bad feeling about him. He seemed to be a powder keg of rage just waiting to explode at any minute. More about this later. So everything for Melissa and I was going great until around the 9th month of our cohabitation. It was then I started to notice a few subtle changes that immediately sparked my suspicion. The first was one day when I walked up on her while she was texting and she nearly jumped out of her skin and hid her phone away from my view. Her excuse for acting like that was she claimed I startled her. Well, that's your first red flag. The next was just the sheer volume of texts she was getting. When I questioned this, she said it was just from her work colleagues. I noticed right after that the number of texts she was getting nearly stopped, only to find out later it was because she silenced the alerts. Red flag number 2. Then she started taking her phone to bed with her and putting it on her nightstand instead of on the charger alongside my phone on our dresser. Red flag number 3. Taking that phone and keeping it close to her even when she's sleeping. I knew at that point something was going on, and her phone held all the answers. One night she fell asleep and left her bedside lamp on. I got up and went around to her side to turn it off. She was sound asleep, so I thought this would be my chance to snoop. I picked up her phone and entered the code, but she had changed it. Red flag number 4. I'm assuming previously he knew what her passcode was. Now all of a sudden out of the blue she changed it and didn't advise him. That's a definite red flag. I then tried holding the phone in front of her face to open it, but since her eyes were closed, the facial recognition didn't work. I hit a dead end, but knew her changing her password without telling me was another sign she was hiding something. Then that Saturday, through an odd twist of fate, I was able to get into her phone. She and I were sitting at the kitchen table, and I noticed she left her phone in the living room on top of the TV. Apparently her mom had been trying to call her, but since she had the phone silenced, we didn't hear it. Her mom then called me, and I handed Melissa my phone to talk to her. The two of them started talking about some nonsense I can't remember, but they were heavy into conversation. Just before her mom called, Melissa was about to head out to the store to grab a few things for her lunch. I think she forgot she was using my phone and said to me she was going to run out to the store. I said okay, and she continued talking to her mother as she left the apartment, leaving me there alone with her phone. As soon as she got outside, I locked the door behind her and went to retrieve her phone, hoping the auto lock hadn't kicked in. Thankfully it didn't, and I was able to get right in. What I found was a string of text messages between her and a person listed as Sharon Work. This is how she had all of her coworkers labeled in her phone, so she obviously did this as a decoy. I had never heard her speak of this Sharon before, and when I read the messages, I found out that Sharon was actually a guy from her office. I'll call him Rob. I had never met Rob before, but found out later he was 39 years old, and he and his wife had just entered into an open marriage. Their first text dated back a little over 2 weeks prior, which just so happened to coincide with when her suspicious behavior began. The text indicated the first time they were together physically happened just that past Monday. Curiously, Melissa told me she went to the walk-in clinic after work on Monday for a burning urethra. This was all a huge lie, as she spent that time with her lover boy Rob. When she came home, she told me she had been diagnosed with a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and we'd have to abstain for a while until she got rid of it. Looking back now, I have to admit the UTI excuse was brilliant, as it gave her an alibi for coming home late and an excuse for not having us with me. I wanted nothing more than to confront her when she got back and throw her cheating self out, but I played it cool and contemplated my next move. What I eventually decided to do was to secretly abandon her without explanation. I already paid the 10th month of the 12-month apartment lease and only had 2 months remaining, with the final month being free of charge as part of the promotion I got when I renewed the lease. I really lucked out here. My plan was to get another place, and one day while she was at work I would move all my stuff to my new place and ghost her, and that's what I did. I got a new apartment 25 minutes away and arranged for a local moving franchise to move all my stuff out to my new place. The only furniture I left her was the spare bed and mattress. The day I moved out, I went to the office and gave them my cancellation notice. I paid for the month 11 and explained to the leasing agent that I had already moved out, but my former girlfriend would likely be staying there through the end of the lease term. The leasing agent suggested we do a walkthrough together so she could take pictures of the current condition of the apartment in the event that anything was damaged during the final months of the lease. I agreed, and we did just that. That was probably pretty smart. As it so happened, the day I moved out, Melissa and Rob had another rendezvous planned. She texted me in the afternoon stating that she had to work over and would be home about 90 minutes late. She said she would get takeout from our favorite place and bring it home for us. I said okay and gave her my order, knowing I wouldn't be there. As expected, at around 7 o'clock she started blowing up my phone. First with multiple missed calls, followed by a barrage of texts asking what was going on. Finally, after a couple hours of making her sweat, I called her. She answered crying and asked me what was going on. I told her that I knew all about Rob and that we were done. She was silent on the other end as I explained I had canceled the lease, and she could live there through the end of the term. She then spoke up through tears, saying she could explain everything and that it's not what it seems. I told her to save it and to not make a fool of herself. She kept going on saying she was sorry for the misunderstanding and begging me, but at that point I had heard enough and hung up. The rest of the night, she kept calling and texting, but I took a page out of her playbook and silenced my phone. I slept like a baby that night. The next morning I woke up and my voicemail box was full, so I deleted all her messages and then blocked her number, as having a full voicemail is a violation of company policy. As an account manager, I work mostly from the road, so she couldn't ambush me at the office. So now she had no way of reaching me since she didn't know where I was staying. I thought to myself, wow, I played this like a pro and got out of this bad situation with minimal damage. Well, I soon found out I wasn't completely rid of her. Remember her wacky parents? They still weren't done with me. A few weeks after I ghosted Melissa, I signed into Facebook for the first time in weeks, and to my surprise, I saw numerous posts by Melissa's mom and replies from some of her friends. Her mom made several posts saying I was mentally abusive to her daughter, gave her an STD, and then abandoned her. Yes, I'm serious, folks, this woman is so ignorant. She actually posted on the internet that her daughter had contracted an STD. The first thing I did after reading this was get tested myself, and thankfully the results came back all clear. Phew, he says, thank God for that. I was so angry about the post I decided to sue Melissa's mom. I went to an attorney recommended by one of my coworkers, and he drafted a demand letter to Melissa's mom ordering her to stop making false claims against me and to immediately remove all current postings, as I would be suing her for libel and slander. The attorney advised me to follow through with suing her even if she complied. The same evening of the day that Melissa's mom received the letter from my attorney, I was confronted by Melissa's father outside of my apartment building. Now listen to this. He says, I don't know how he found out where I lived, but he did. He approached me from the back as I was walking up to the security doors at the front of the building. I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw it was him. Before I could do or say anything, he walked right over to me and grabbed me around the collar and neck and starts lifting me, saying, you son of a. I told him, hey, what are you doing? You're choking me. I then went into full survival mode. I jerked back away from him and with my right arm swung as hard as I could. My right fist connected directly with the side of his nose. I had never hit anything or anyone that hard before, and when I did, I heard a loud crack. He immediately dropped to the ground, stumbling off, holding his bleeding nose and screaming in agony. I started towards him to help, but then thought I'd better not, and instead called the police, as this lunatic would be the type to falsely accuse me. I called the police, told them everything that happened, and they filed a report. I then told them my building has a security camera and I would call the office tomorrow to have them provide the tape. I called and they provided me with a 6-minute clip of the time in question. The video clip and sound clearly showed Melissa's dad ambush me, grabbed me by the neck, and lifted me off the ground before I swung. After reviewing the footage, the investigating officer asked if I wanted to press charges. Based on what he saw in the tape, he recommended I do so. So I did and obtained a temporary restraining order. Since her parents live in a different jurisdiction, the officer said they would be back in touch in a few days with an update. Well, 2 days later, I got a call from my attorney. He informed me that he had been contacted by an attorney representing Melissa's parents. Apparently, they had received a letter from my attorney and her dad had been contacted by the local police. My attorney said their attorney told him they were willing to do anything to resolve these matters with me, as they didn't want to be sued and her father didn't want a criminal record. Though I wanted nothing more for them to sweat and suffer a little, in the end I agreed not to sue them and to drop the charges against her father. In exchange, they both agreed to a full written confession of guilt for both the libel/slander and for the unprovoked attack. Her mother also was ordered to post a statement on her Facebook account for 6 months explaining that all the previous statements she made about me were false. Like I said, I really would have liked to make both of these maggots suffer, but I was just glad to finally be done with this family. But unfortunately, the fun didn't stop there. About 6 months later, I was out at a bar with several of my coworkers when I ran into a woman who used to work with Melissa. I always liked this woman as she seemed genuine. In our conversation, she proceeded to let me know that Melissa is pregnant and was probably close to her due date now. She then told me it was known that Melissa and Rob had a thing and they told people in the office they both were in open relationships. She said about a month or so after I broke up with Melissa, Rob left the company and she later heard he divorced his wife. Now listen to this. She said the rumor is that Rob's wife contracted HSV-2, that's herpes, through one of her open marriage partners and gave it to Rob, who then gave it to Melissa. See what promiscuity without protection gets you? I again thank God I found out about this and broke up with her before she infected me, but that wasn't everything. She said Melissa had told everyone that the baby she's carrying is mine and that after it's born, she hoped we can reconcile. He says, what the? There's no way the baby was mine based on the dates, so I immediately contacted my attorney and had him send a cease and desist letter to her. Later, I found out through the same former coworker of Melissa that she had given birth to a little boy and the poor kid acquired HSV-2 during birth from his mother and almost didn't survive. Apparently, the virus is very dangerous to infants, that poor kid. While I despise that entire family, I feel really bad for that baby being born into the world with an incurable STD he got from his mother. Poor kid, I hope he grows up and lives a healthy and successful life. He says, well, that's my nightmare relationship story. As I said, I'm not looking for anything, I just wanted to share my story for what it's worth. May you live well, Nigel. So that's the end of his story, and he doesn't have any updates, but he did get a number of replies to his post, and in some of the replies he responded to some questions. So let's take a look at those now, but before we do, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, be sure to hit that like button. That will make sure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. So now, let's take a look at some of those questions he got and his replies back to the people that responded to him. The first one's from a guy. He says, have you had any contact with Melissa since this happened? The OP says, thankfully I haven't. The last time we communicated was 7+ years ago. I don't know what happened to her or her parents. They deleted all their social media accounts after our fiasco. I wish them well, especially the child who was born into that horrible family with a terrible disease. And I have to agree with this guy. I didn't realize that this herpes virus could be so deadly to newborns, but I looked it up after reading this story, and it's just a terrible condition, and I do feel sorry for that kid. I don't know the kid, of course, but I feel really bad for a kid that would be born into the world like that, acquiring herpes from his mother, and that's something he's going to have for the rest of his life. So I too wish this young kid nothing but the best, and I hope he has a very prosperous and successful and happy life. Next, we got another question from a guy. He says, why didn't you drop the charges against her old man? If that were me, I would have done everything I could have to put that idiot in jail. The OP responds and he says, I hear you, but you have to understand, I just wanted to be done with them and to get my life back on track. I accomplished that, and I'm happy with the outcome and how I handled things. I sure learned some valuable lessons. When I look back at this, he said that her dad was a high school football coach. I bet her dad was used to going up to his players and grabbing them by the shoulder pads and maybe lifting them off the ground. So I think he probably approached the OP that way when he confronted him outside of his apartment building, not expecting that the OP was going to react in a defensive posture and then just slug him, which he should have, because that's totally self-defense in that case. Like I've said in all my videos, I'm totally against violence, but in the case of self-defense, I think it's absolutely warranted. And then finally, a question from a woman. Now listen to what she says. She says, what's your relationship status now? Are you married or seeing anyone currently? She says, PS. I'm available, wink wink. The OP responds and says, I'm not married and don't ever intend to, but I've been seeing a great woman for the past 3 years and would like to build a family with her someday. She's younger, so we've still got time. And that's a good point that the OP makes. He wants to go out and build a family with this woman, but as he says here, he's never getting married. So guys, remember that you can go out and build a family with a woman. Have children with her, you don't have to get married. And now with that, I want to cover what I think are the morals of the story. And there were a ton of them. The first one, never rush into a relationship. These situations rarely turn out well. And you see what happened to this guy. What did he do? I mean, he moved this woman into his apartment after 5.5 months and then started paying all of her bills. Huge mistake. Number two, if her parents are crazy, there's a chance she could be as well. And I would say there's a very good chance she could be as well. And you know the old saying about never sticking your in crazy? That applies here. Number three, always keep your cool and never employ violence unless it is a case of self-defense like I just said. Number four, ghosting is, by far and away, the best way to break up with the cheater. Because guess what? You don't have to deal with all the nonsense and all the lies they're going to try to spin to you. And all the begging and the pleading. Nope, you just walk away clean. Yeah, you're still going to be broken up inside, but you're going to get over it much faster because guess what? You took back control of the situation. And finally, living a great life is the best possible revenge. I'm sure this Melissa has followed this Nigel's life over time, and she's probably just beating herself up saying, he was mine and I blew it. I let him get away. He's the one that got away. He's living a great life now, and my life is absolutely miserable. He's totally forgotten about me. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about him every day. I guarantee that's what's going on with her. So those are my thoughts, people. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever gone through something like this? Tell us about it in the comments. Also be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. This story is called Accident Attorney Gets Hammered for Her Infidelity. I actually thought I would never be on a forum, but here I am sharing my story of my wife of 15 years, who is a prominent accident attorney who had caught cheating on me with another attorney. I don't have any kids. She has a daughter from a previous relationship who shares a place with another woman. My wife never married, and I am in my second marriage. My wife is 46 and I am 48. She had this attitude that she was invincible because she was an attorney and the judge would see things her way. Our bedroom life went straight to zero. Once I got injured on my job, I work construction and most of the time our jobs are seasonal. So when work is slow, I have to take odd jobs to make up for the lost wages. My wife was very supportive and attentive in the beginning. I wasn't mobile as much, and I had to depend on her in the beginning stages after many surgeries. My injury was, I fell from a scaffolding and broke my left arm and left leg and foot. I was in the hospital for a few weeks and had to have surgery to repair my arm, which they placed a metal rod in it. And in my leg, they had to put a steel plate and 6 screws. It was a very long process of healing. I was out of work for almost 2 years. My wife had to take on a lot more cases because we had bills that still had to be paid. She started working longer hours and sometimes she wouldn't come home until late at night. I would already be in bed because I was on so many different pain medications that I couldn't stay up later than 9 p.m. She would come home. Sometimes she would be in a bad mood and I would ask her what was wrong. And she would say that she was just tired from working all day. I started to notice little things that were odd. Like, she would wear this perfume that I had never seen her wear before. And when I would ask her what it was, she would say, "Oh, I just found it at the store and I liked it, so I bought it." I also noticed that she was taking more showers than usual and she started working out more. I didn't think anything of it. After all, as a prominent accident attorney, she was swamped with accident cases. When she started her law career, she started out making almost $85,000 a year. Now, she has surpassed $150,000 a year, and she has carried the load for us for the last 2 years. I never made as much money as she did. I made pretty decent money, but nowhere near my wife. My wife was the first to go to college in her family, and she was the first to become an attorney. And she was very proud of her accomplishments. I am very proud of her too, but I started to feel like I was not good enough for her because I didn't have a college degree and I felt like she was always working and I was just sitting at home, not doing anything. Over the last couple of months, I started noticing she would come home and text on her phone a lot. I really didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe she was talking to one of the other attorneys regarding the case or one of her girlfriends. One night when my wife came home from work, we talked for a little bit. Then she said she was going to take a shower, and she left her phone on the kitchen counter. I usually don't look at her phone, but I did this time to my surprise. I couldn't get in. She had a password on it. My heart started beating fast because she has never had her phone locked the entire time we have been married. The next day, when my wife went to work, I asked a good friend of mine to come over to my place so I could talk to him. I told him what happened and he said, "If you suspect something, don't make any accusations without proof. Don't make the mistake I did." Then he said, "Listen, if you want, we can put a GPS tracker in our car to see if she is up to something, or you could hire a private investigator." I told him, "No, I am not hiring a private investigator. I can't afford one." We agreed on the GPS tracker and decided when she came home, we would do it late at night while she was asleep. Well, my friend would install it. We have a three-car garage that sits away from the house a little. The few days pass and my friend installed the GPS tracker app on my phone, and I didn't notice anything suspicious the first 3 days she was at work, and the tracker showed her leaving work and coming straight home on the fourth night. That's when my suspicions were confirmed. My friend had come over a little after 9 p.m. and I made a comment to him that my wife is usually home by now. The first thing my friend said was, "Check the app." The GPS tracker showed that my wife was not at her job. She was in a residential area in a wealthy neighborhood that I knew she didn't have any business being in. I told my friend to drive there. We drove around the neighborhood until we saw her car parked in the driveway of a large home. We waited for about 30 minutes. Then we saw my wife walking towards the car. She was carrying a garment bag and a small suitcase. She put them in the trunk of her car. Then she got in the car and drove off. We followed her to a hotel. We waited for about an hour. Then we saw her come out of the hotel with a man. They were laughing and joking. And they all of a sudden kissed each other. My friend, who thinks fast on his feet, whipped out his phone and took a photo and a small video clip of them kissing. He looked over at me and said, "I am sorry, man." I had tears in my eyes. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I told him it was okay. I needed to see it with my own eyes to believe it. We sat there and watched as they got in her car and drove off. We followed them to a restaurant and we watched as they went inside. As they were walking into the restaurant, this man had his hands on my wife's butt. My friend just shook his head. I was fuming, but I couldn't do anything with a bum leg and bum arm from my fall. I told myself right then and there, I need to get a grip and start taking care of what I needed to. My friend told me if I needed a place to stay, I can stay with him until I get on my feet again. As the days went by, my friend and I continued to spy on my wife and get as much video and photos as we could. We later found out that the guy she was seeing is another attorney who works with her and he is married as well. But we both wondered where his wife was. Come to find out, his wife is in the hospital fighting COVID. So, my plan was to call an attorney here in Georgia, and he opened my eyes a little. First thing he said to me was, "If you file for divorce and you sleep with your wife after you have filed, you won't get any alimony." I said to him, "Why is that?" He said, "If you sleep with her and you know she has cheated, you will not get any alimony. It means you have forgiven her. So, what do you want to do?" I told the attorney to go ahead and start the divorce process. And I would be filing for alimony as well. I immediately got on the phone with my friend and asked him to meet me at my house to help me pack some things while my wife was at work. She has been coming home late anyway, so we had time. I get to my house and my friend is already there. I just took most of my clothes, my computer, and some other odds and ends and followed him to his place. At about 1:16 in the morning, my wife sends me a text and asks where I am. I don't respond. I just let her wonder. To my surprise, when I didn't respond to her text, she didn't reach out anymore. Maybe she knew something was up, I don't know. The next morning, my attorney calls me and says that my wife will be served with divorce papers soon, and he asked me what my living status was. I told him that I moved out of the house temporarily, and I have not slept with my wife since I found out. Later in the day, my wife calls me. I don't answer, and she left a voicemail asking me to please call her. She is worried about me. I am thinking, BS, she isn't worried about me. I simply called her back and told her I knew she has been cheating on me and I filed for divorce. She was blown away and she denied it. Of course, I told her I had proof and hung the phone up. Over the next few weeks, my wife was served with divorce papers. She was highly upset and told me in a text, "Good luck getting anything in the divorce. She displayed a side of her I never knew existed. She was saying, I am a lawyer. I will make sure you don't get anything. You are nothing without me, just belittling me. At the divorce hearing, my lawyer presented evidence that my wife was cheating. She had a divorce lawyer as well, so he couldn't refute it. To make a long story short, I got spousal support for 7 years in the amount of $3,500 a month. My now ex-wife was livid. She thought just because she was an attorney, she would get her way. The judge also gave me 30 days to get the rest of my things out of the house. It only took me 2 days. My friend had a big enough home that I could put things in. His father had recently passed away and left him millions. And my friend also owned 2 coffee shops. I didn't care about the house. She could have it. And she made enough money to pay the mortgage on it. In the coming weeks, my friend and I learned that the wife of my now ex-wife's recovered from her battle with COVID and found out that my ex-wife was having an affair with her husband. She went to their law firm and confronted them both in front of the other attorneys. They didn't get fired, but they were both reprimanded. And my ex-wife was told that if anything like this ever happens again, she will be fired. The law firm didn't take kindly to that type of publicity. I found out in the craziest way. The wife of my ex-wife's AP called me one day and told me everything. I couldn't believe it. And to top off the crazy stuff, my ex-wife sent me a text, wanting to talk and offered to cook me dinner. I read the text and deleted it. Since the divorce and finding this all out, I have been getting better with my mobility, exercising more to regain my strength. My friend, who is a godson, offered me a job to help him run his 2 coffee shops. So, things are looking up for me. I won't be ready to date anyone for a few months. I am not mentally ready for that. I don't think I can trust any woman right now. Thank you everyone for all of the encouraging comments. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I sincerely